Today on Capitol Sunday, a roadmap to the midterm elections. We'll go inside the political playbooks of the Republicans and the Democrats. Plus, putting the way we elect our leaders under the microscope. Who's really pulling the strings? And finding God in a test tube. How the leader of the Human Genome Project hopes to bring science and religion together. From the WJLA Broadcast Center in Arlington, Virginia, I'm Leon Harris, along with Kathleen Matthews. Well, just as the White House was launching its political comeback before November's midterm elections, a series of brush fires began to burn in the Middle East.
With Iraq aflame, war now between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon, the president's domestic agenda has been sidelined. Well, how will this affect members of Congress who are now returning to their districts to campaign? We're joined by Democratic strategist Richard Goodstein and by Michael Zach, who's written a history of the Republican Party. Thanks for joining us today. The new normal for the Bush administration seems to be, at this point, constant crisis. In 2004, voters didn't want to shift leadership under that same kind of scenario. What do you think, Richard? Do you think they're going to want to make a shift in 2006?
Yeah, I think they're tired of all the crises that they're facing right now. I mean, the fact of the matter is what the Democrats need to do is harness the message of change versus the status quo. And if you look down all the issues, Iraq, gas prices, health care, Katrina, and all the fallout from so many other issues, if the Democrats can just get their arms around the fact that the public seems desperate for change, I think that's a winning strategy.
Michael's shaking his head yes. You agree with that?
Well, the theme of my book and the speeches that I give is that Republicans need to appreciate their heritage as a party of civil rights achievement. They don't, generally, and that's what puts them on the defensive on almost any issue at all.
You know, it's interesting because the president has cut back his time at the ranch for this vacation period. Is it good to be even seen at all on the ranch, do you think, this August?
Well, it's a good question, although the counter question is, what Republican congressional candidate wants to be seen with President Bush? The fact of the matter is, if you look at what's happening, what he's doing is he's going in and raising money at night, kind of behind closed doors, but you don't see a lot of public rallies with candidates for the House and the Senate with him in New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, where you have so many members that are in trouble.
As a matter of fact, we had a conversation right here on this set with Michael Steele, who's running for the Senate seat in Maryland, who said that recently this past week he made comments about how having an R for Republican attached to him was like wearing the scarlet letter. Michael, what do you do about that if you're a Republican candidate this fall?
Well, again, the key to it all is for Republicans to know that the Republican Party is the party that freed the slaves. The Republican Party is the party that extending voting rights to African Americans. Most suffragists were Republicans. There's a wealth of heritage of the Republican Party. That's the moral high ground. That's the political initiative. And Republicans cede that advantage when they don't care as much about what the Republican Party has achieved.
Well, for the Republican Party to start talking like that means they've got to make people forget about the last, 20, 30 years, 40 years?
Well, not true at all. Most Republicans, for instance, the Civil Rights Act, most Republicans supported the Civil Rights Act much more than the Democrats, who filibustered against it. That fact alone should be hammered home time and time again by Republican candidates.
Let's parse some of these specific issues. How much do you think 2006 is going to be a referendum on Iraq?
I think hugely. And I think the evidence of that right now is what happened between Joe Lieberman and his opponent, Lamont. I mean, the fact that that was the kind of race that it was shows that Democrats certainly saw and see Iraq as a huge issue. And frankly, I don't think Republican voters see any differently.
Can Republicans get past Iraq?
Well, it's not something to get past. I would say, first off, Connecticut, I would say that's a local issue for the state of Connecticut because the demographics, the political leanings of most people there. But as far as getting past Iraq, not at all. The war on terror is something that all Americans should support, and as I do, what the Republican Party and the Bush administration is trying to accomplish.
What we've seen in the polls that have come out in the past week or so is that in the public's mind, Iraq seems to trump almost every other issue, including Israel. Israel's there on the list. But the two are going to probably get closer and closer in people's minds as this plays out over the next coming weeks. How would you advise either side to talk about the two issues? Would you be advising them to sort of conflate the two the way we saw Republicans do with Osama bin Laden and Saddam Hussein in the past? Or do you think that would work this time around?
I think that just the truth is the best strategy for the Republican Party. It's a global war on terror. Osama bin Laden's second in command, where was he? Baghdad, Iraq. He wasn't Iraqi, he was Jordanian. It's a global war on terror. What do we have in Lebanon? Hezbollah, supported by another country, Iran. Make sure the American electorate knows that the that the U.S. government and all people in favor of freedom are with us in the war on terror.
You know, Democrats are actually even more divided over what Israel should be doing than they are over the war in Iraq. So how do Democrats deal with that issue when there's so much division?
I think the Democratic message on both Iraq and kind of the broader Middle East issues is mismanagement. The fact of the matter is, whether you agreed or not that going to Iraq in the first place made sense, everybody, I mean almost everybody outside the 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue thinks this has been mismanaged. And by the same token, the fact that for so many years the president took such a hands-off approach towards Israel and dealing with others in the Middle East, it's unclear whether involvement could have made any difference, but the fact of the matter is, that's when he looked like he was at the ranch, when he really should have been kind of rolling up his sleeves.
You said two words that we don't often hear mentioned together, Democrats and message. There really, up to this point, hasn't been that big of a difference between the Republicans' stance on many of these issues and the Democrats. Are we going to be seeing anything at all in the coming weeks, coming months, that will show more contrast between the two? And where do you start with that?
Well, just go down the list. Again, on Iraq, the Republican position, and they forced a vote on this, was, do we stay the course or do we do something different? The Republican position was, stay the course. Most of the public says, do something different, and that's where the Democrats were. Next issue down the pike is health care. The Democrats, basically, their position is, let's do more for access to health care and bring down the costs. The Republicans have been tagged with, no, we don't want to let people import drugs from Canada, and we'll give favors to the drug companies. You go down the list, certainly on response to Katrina, the Democrats, I think, sort of pointed to what happened when Bill Clinton was president, and there were various natural disasters that got attended to much differently than Katrina.
Tip O'Neill said all politics is local. Yeah. Ultimately, will it be Iraq, Iran's nuclear capability, Iran's designs on the region, or will it be gas prices and immigration that this election will turn on?
Well, all politics is local. People vote according to their specific problems and concerns. But, again, the economy is in very good shape. Democrats like to point to the gas prices, far lower in Europe, for instance. But also, unemployment is low, housing is strong, the economy is strong. And the Republican Party needs to get that message out much better than it has been doing so far.
Yeah, the problem with that is that that's not the way the public perceives it. I mean, if you ask the public, how are they doing, or how do they think the economy is doing, most of the public thinks not all that well. And the reason that is because there is definitely a group at the top that's gotten the tax breaks that's doing awfully, awfully well. Poverty has gone up every single year under the Bush administration, hardly a compassionate, conservative approach. And so many other indicators that if you look at the middle class on down, they're hurting. And that's when Hillary Clinton recently talked about a new dream for the American middle class. That's what she was talking about.
Are we going to see an October surprise this year? Are we going to see something like Osama bin Laden, I guess, being frog marched somewhere into some sort of a courtroom somewhere? Are we going to see another raising of the terror threat level sometime this fall? If you had to bet on that, both of you, what do you think about that?
I don't think the Bush administration plays games like that with national security. If there's a threat, they'll announce it. A surprise, an October surprise would be just as much a surprise to the administration as to the rest of the country.
Richard?
I've been saying for months that Iran, even before what's been happening with Israel and Lebanon, was where that was going to happen, that the United States was going to somehow pick a fight, go to Congress, try to get some sort of resolution authorizing a show of force, and that is something the administration was going to try to get to cleave the Republicans from Democrats and make Democrats appear to be weak. I don't think, though, that that's going to fly anymore.
Michael Zach, Richard Goodstein, thanks very much for joining us today on
pleasure.
Capital Sunday.
Thank you.
Well, voters choose their politicians, right?
Well, maybe not, maybe not. Coming up next, we'll explore the way that political parties